All right, we are just 2 minutes past 9. So maybe we can just start with a quick introduction and welcome to our audience and to our speakers. So of course, I cannot say good morning because I know that you're joining from different parts of the world. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're joining. And a very warm welcome to our audience and to our speakers. Now, of course, the theme of this roundtable is about sustainable packaging, and we know that it's a baseline expectation today, right? Yet the mass scale adoption is not where it should be, and we need to act fast. So today in this session, we have gathered with industry experts to discuss, what are the deterrents to mass scale adoption and some successful use cases and case studies on how it can be done. And we are not saying that it is just the substrate costs which are high, but there can be so many other factors which probably there are gaps which needs to be bridged. For example, high cost of production, definitely high material cost, eroding margins for suppliers, low scale adoption in terms of at least the small, medium brands. And of course, collaboration is key. So probably there are gaps in the collaboration and in the entire ecosystem. So what can be done to bridge these gaps to, go where we want to go with sustainable packaging? That's what we're going to discuss here. And, without any delay, I would like to kickstart this session by introducing our speakers. So let me just flip the slide. Yes. So of course you see the speakers on screen, but just a very warm welcome to Robert Flores, who is VP Sustainability at Berry Global, and Tristan Kaye, who is the Commercial Director at Notpla, and of course Ismail Sutaria, who is the Chief Analyst for Packaging Domain at Future Market Insights. So thank you all for making time for this session and being here today. And for those of you who are new to FMI session, just a quick introduction to FMI. We are a market research and business consulting company. We are SMR certified. Packaging is one of our key domains, you can say, but of course, we have food and beverage, consumer products, retail, healthcare, the entire value chain. We have been recognized as a top business consulting company by Clutch in 2022 on account of high client satisfaction score. And this session is a part of a series in the packaging ecosystem that we do. We conduct virtual sessions almost every quarter on packaging on different topics, which our clients have questions on. So this is one of those. So of course, a warm welcome to our audience to also join future sessions as well. All right, and just before we kick this off, a few guidelines for our audience. Our audience is muted throughout the session, but we will have an interesting audience Q&A at the end, I am hoping, because like I said, we have the maximum registrations for this webinar. Please leave your questions in the chat box that you see on your console, and you can mention the name of the speaker that you're directing it to, so that will enable me to moderate the Q&A better. Also, this session is being recorded, so you will receive a copy of the recording within 2 days, by day after. And in the same email, you will also get the slides which are being presented today, as well as FMI's packaging, sustainable packaging ebook, which has been just launched. So all of it you will receive within 2 days' time. And we will try our best to address all your questions in this session within the, within the span of 1 hour. But however, due to time, if we are not able to take up a few questions, do not be worried. We will get back to you with the answers one-on-one, right? Okay, so let's start this with Ismail. So Ismail, you are Chief Analyst for the packaging domain of FMI, and you and your team, you've been researching and looking at the sustainable packaging domain for a decade. So according to you, where do you see the sustainable packaging market today vis-a-vis the traditional packaging market? And because we are discussing about why there has not been a mass scale adoption yet, what is your opinion on that, and how we can mitigate those aspects?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and a very good morning to gentlemen on the screen over here that I can see, and to the audiences. Well, sustainability, Aditi's, is no longer a marketing jargon or a buzzword anymore, I would say. Businesses are rapidly developing and using packaging materials that not only increase the life cycle inventory, but also reduce the ecological footprint at the end of the day. The significant momentum gained by circular economy has brought attention of various packaging giants and the governments to respond to concerns associated with packaging waste and its impact on the environment. With increasing regulatory pressures and rising consumer awareness, I see a lot of packaging companies and brands across the globe that are making bold declarations regarding sustainability and commitments for the years to come. Let me put it in very simple terms. I think for me, as I would say, everyone would have a little bit different definition of what they think of sustainable packaging. But I think it needs to have a perfect blend or a combination or a right balance, I would say, of the attributes that you can see on the screen. It needs to reduce the carbon footprint. It needs to be a lightweight package, be environment friendly. It needs to be completely circular at the end of the day. The industry needs to start using and recycling more and more of packaging that is being used. And last but not the least, obviously the shelf life of the product being packed needs to be extended. And I personally feel that there is a lot of room for each of these attributes and features for the industry to put on and to work. So this is my simple definition of sustainable packaging, and I feel the perfect permutation and combination of all of these will certainly drive the sustainability packaging ecosystem in the years to come. Well, moving on to the next page. Okay, so here you can see I've highlighted a few crucial parameters based on its degree of sustainability and adoption. The ones highlighted in green are parameters that need to gain quick traction in order for the industry to witness a paradigm shift to the sustainable spot or quadrant maybe by the end of 2040. The blue ones are the next priority, which act as value creators, and the ones in gray are less priority parameters. But it is very important for attributes like the ones highlighted in green, be it recyclability or reusability, net zero, complete circular, sustainable design. I think the industry needs to have higher adoption and large-scale commercialization of these trends that will help us to conceptualize sustainable packaging ecosystem in the years to come. Moving on to the next page. Okay, so here I have tried to highlight a classic example of how a recyclable flexible pouch can be a sustainable alternative to an HDPE or a plastic bottle. So switching to a more of sustainable format or a substrate will not only reduce the price of the package, but also the weight. It will help us to reduce wastage, and at the end of the day, help us to reach the net zero emission criteria that we are all looking to target. The big question is that the cost of switching to a sustainable design and substrate is low, that you can clearly see, how maybe by 10% the cost can go down in totality. But at the end of the day, is it going to be commercially viable unless and until not adopted on a very large scale, or we don't start mass commercialization of this sustainable packaging concept? So that is something, I want everyone to make a note of. So I personally believe, it's my opinion, that unless and until we don't start adopting sustainable packaging throughout every node of the value chain, it would make it difficult to be a commercially viable concept and for everyone to start using it at the end of the day. Quickly moving on to the next slide, wherein Future Market Insights has estimated the market size of this industry. So it's a big industry, I would say. The market size for sustainable packaging is expected to cross the $500 billion billion mark by the end of 2030, witnessing 2x growth and expanding at a CAGR of more than 7%, which I believe is very healthy. And on the right side, you can see a lot of sustainable packaging reports and concepts that we have worked on, wherein you can see most of them witnessing a very healthy growth. And maybe by the end of 2030, all will be huge markets. So I think sustainability will be the #1 priority for all the stakeholders in the packaging industry. And it's not going to be a choice anymore in the years to come. Moving on to the next page, wherein I have given my bit of analysis trying to highlight certain sustainable attributes and which ones would be the most favorable or positive substrates depending upon the trends. So game-changing trends will create different tailwinds and headwinds depending upon the company's adoption of different substrates. So in the last decade, we all saw rising awareness against the use of plastics, potential risk of single-use plastics with stringent policies such as taxes on plastic bans in various countries. This definitely led to better adoption of different materials and substrates such as glass, metal, paper, bio-based and plant-based material, bioplastic, and a lot of plastic with more and more of recycled content in it. Yet adoption remained low as opposed to traditional and conventional plastic, maybe because these didn't have the functional or cost advantages like plastic, maybe, or maybe these are sentiments that the consumers have in their mind. So even with disruption, all the major consumer packaging trends continue to favor plastics over other substances in most dimensions. Yes, and I would say there's nothing wrong in that. Plastics has always been a major substrate for our packaging industry. In the context of this increasingly influential trend, I think paper and board, metal, glass have strong recyclability and renewability profiles. Glass, as in the past, has some premium association, and now we can see some new plant-based material, some packaging with bio-based material, with craft paper, that has gained newly found status as a signal for more and more eco-friendly packaging that is matching or meeting the sustainability concept that we are all trying to understand today. So I feel the industry has evolved in terms of innovative substrates and formats, and it will be very interesting to see how brands and converters utilize the best possible substrates to meet the sustainability needs in the future. So over here, you can see a lot of sustainable attributes are favoring some substrate, whereas there are some other trends that are favorable for maybe the other alternatives of substrates that we have. So the point I'm trying to make over here is that the industry has evolved in terms of innovative substrates and formats, and it will be interesting to see how brands utilize them. But the point I would want to highlight over here or summarize is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to the right substrate. Depending upon the use cases and applications, I think the substrate choice will differ. But yes, it needs to have those sustainability criteria that we discussed in the very beginning. Moving on to the next slide, wherein we have tried our bit to highlight which are the industries that are leading the adoption of sustainable packaging and which are lagging behind. So when it comes to the laggards, I would say yes, pharmaceutical relatively has a bigger challenge because of its vast polluter and carbon emitting concepts with respect to packaging. Now the question is, what is obstructing this market growth? Maybe use to more of glass or traditional plastics to prevent contamination, or maybe to match the sterilized filling of pharmaceuticals. Also, to a certain extent, ladies and gentlemen, I feel interaction between stakeholders across the pharma value chain is relatively poor when it comes to recyclability. Now, talking about the industry that is by far leading, I would say food and beverage, and even the beverage industry, to be more precise and particular. I think beverage brands have been actively seeking new sustainable formats and increased adoption of 100% recyclable plastics and even aluminum cans or metal packaging. These brand owners follow sustainable design concept where the product shape, the size is redesigned to enable lightweight, maybe have reduction in pack size, miniaturized packs, thereby affording 100% sustainable packaging. Also, stronger collaborations formed across the value chain, enabling better tracing, collection, sorting, and recycling is being a driver for this industry. On the right-hand side, I have just tried to highlight a few of the packaging substrates which would be favorable for its end users. So maybe recycled and bioplastics is a very hot spot or a preferred substrate maybe in F&B. For paper packaging, you can see a lot of e-commerce companies and food service packaging providers preferring that. Metal, obviously, in the industrial packaging or the beverage packaging. And glass still a favorable choice in healthcare. However, I would see a lot of these changing with sustainable packaging coming into picture. Obviously, keeping in mind two very important concepts. What is the impact, the ecological impact on the environment, and what is the recycle rate of these packaging that we are trying to adopt within each of these end-use industries. So, moving on to the next slide, wherein you can see I've just given some little bit comparison of how a PET bottle or an aluminum can have different greenhouse gas impact and recycling rate. It might be the case that maybe a PET bottle relatively has a lower greenhouse gas emission, but the aluminum cans, on the other hand, might have a little edge when it comes to the recyclability. Clubbing this with the other case that I have on the next slide is you can see how aluminum cans, glass bottles, the PET bottles, so how recycling rate is different for each of these. So my analysis says that relatively aluminum cans within the beverage will have a better recycling loop or have a better recycling rate when it has passed through various stages of its life cycle. So I think smarter choice amongst packaging formats, keeping in mind recyclability with net zero, will be a win-win situation. So I think both the suppliers, the brand owners would need to be very smart in selecting the right choice of substrate and design with 2 points at the back of their mind. What will be the ecological impact and what is the recyclable rate? Quickly moving on. So this is a very interesting concept that I have tried to bring in over here. So we are seeing a lot of countries are giving their best when it comes to regulatory scenarios. A lot of government bodies are giving incentives, but I still believe that the execution and implementation is not on a very large scale. There are a lot of talks. Obviously, there are companies including Berry and Notpla that are doing a lot when it comes to sustainable packaging and promoting sustainable packaging initiatives. But a lot of countries need to prioritize some of the other areas or avenues which they think are behind them. So sustainable design, sorting and collection, recyclability, regulatory pressures, degree of awareness, or how many of consumers are aware, what is the scale of commercialization, and what are the resource availability. So let's take an example of Europe. So we would say maybe in terms of resource availability, in terms of sorting and collection, yes, they have done well. But yes, what about the scale of commercialization? What about the degree of awareness? So each and every country relatively needs to see which are the priority areas they need to expedite, which they need to push on in order to ensure that we are really being sustainable in the next 2 decades to come. Moving on to the next page. All right. So at the end of the day, how much ever we try and understand how close we are in terms of reaching sustainability for the packaging, it's very important to understand what consumers feel, what are the real-time insights they are trying to express, and how well they are aware. So as per the interviews that we have taken, I have come to a conclusion that it has to be noted that a lot of millennials and consumers are feeling very positive towards companies that are not only using sustainable packaging, but are thinking of other concepts like recycling or saving the environment or working on packaging that will help the climate to prevent the climate change and all these things. So I would say millennials today are really expecting clean, recyclable, compostable, and maybe plant-based packaging for the years to come. With the recession sentiments going on in some clusters across the globe, the only challenge is again the price point. Would they think of paying an extra pie or an extra money for sustainable packaging? Are they ready? So this is something that we need to all think and try and understand that unless and until we are not making the adoption grow at a very large scale, we cannot bring down the cost curve. And if we are not bringing down the cost curve, I think consumers are still hesitant to pay that extra penny for sustainable packaging. So this is one of the challenges that I think I wanted to put on in today's webinar. Well, moving on to the next page. So yes, from the supply side, I think a lot of packaging manufacturers have a solid agenda, yet in practical terms, I think that it is still far when it comes to achieving circularity, complete circularity. Even though I feel that with years passing on, a lot of initiatives have been taken on. So 60% of them, yes, are very serious about sustainability. But yes, again, when it comes to the brand owners, there are a lot of challenges that I would want to highlight. The inability to pass on the cost to consumers, maybe the margins can get compressed, lack of sustainability goals at every node of the value chain that I would want to highlight. So these are some challenges that the converters and brand owners across the value chain are facing today. Moving on to my last slide, wherein I would want to summarize in a very simple manner. So I think once this industry achieves scale with infrastructure complexities is streamlined, the cost curve will fall, leading to mass scale adoption. And there are certain avenues which everyone in the stakeholder needs to have an eye on. So it's not only the packaging manufacturers, it's not only all of us, it's not only the consumers. I think everyone in this value chain needs to do a bit from their end, keeping in mind some avenues that they need to work on. So one is sustainable packaging design. So they need to ensure that the packaging format and the substrate that they are preferring is going to be sustainable depending upon the use case and the industry that they are targeting. Second is use of more bio-based and plant-based materials, more of recycled content within plastic, more of paper packaging, more of plant-based materials need to come into picture in real time. 3, keep in mind the recyclable and the reusable concept. I think the bulk packaging and the logistic and the transport industry is making a lot of use of maybe crates and bulk containers. And I think at the end of the day, unless and until you're not reusing it, you're not making the best use of the packaging that you're making for consumers today. 4th is automation and technology. We have seen a lot of companies spending on technology, IoT, trying to make more of connected packaging and intelligent packaging. But I think this concept needs to smartly be utilized to ensure that we are not deflecting from our goals of sustainability. So I think technology can be very well utilized to make consumers aware in regards to how they need to make packaging sustainable, and also give clear understanding on labels and on the printing of packaging to make sure that the awareness is increasing year by year. Streamline and stringent regulatory landscape. So yes, I think it's more or less streamlined in some countries, but at the same time, it needs to be standardized. It's not going to happen if only in one corner of the globe it's very strict and stringent. I think there is a need of standardization and streamlining the regulatory scenarios that the government bodies are executing in every cluster of the globe. And last but not the least, in order to bring down the cost, in order to make our industry very much sustainable and be a sustainable packaging ecosystem, there is a need to collaborate at every node of the value chain. So I would end it by saying that collaboration at the end of the value chain or at every node of the value chain will be the key mantra. So I think that's it from my side, and I would like to again thank you all for being here and giving me a chance to express my views on this industry today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ismail. Thank you so much. And you definitely covered some very interesting facts and insights from our packaging ebook as well. And particularly interesting for me was the comparison of the substrates that you did on various aspects of functionality, pricing, recyclability. And I think that is what will be important, because there are new innovative substrates coming up. But how are they performing on those aspects, on those parameters? And of course, to bring down costs, you need scale, and for that you need adoption. So it's kind of a catch-22 today, which needs to be really solved. So thank you so much for those insights. At this point, I would like to again remind our audience to leave their questions in the Q&A box, and we will address them towards the end. All right, so moving towards Robert. So Robert, you are VP Sustainability at Berry Global, and of course, Berry Global is making significant strides in recyclability advancements or bio-based substrates. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how you are helping brands with their sustainability goals, and what is your opinion on how to make this industry commercially viable?
Yes, thanks, Aditi. Are we going to my slides?
Yeah, you can see the slides now.
Okay, yes, perfect. Yes, for those of you that may not be familiar with us, just want to give a quick overview of Berry. Obviously we're a leader around the world in terms of converting and packaging. We have over 100,000 products. We convert over 6 billion pounds of resin annually, so we're one of the largest converters of plastic. We have over 265 manufacturing locations, 18,000 customers, 46,000 employees, and 4 divisions. So, in terms of packaging locations, we're located close to our customers, minimizing shipping distances and helping to further reduce carbon footprints. And we're really, one of the most diverse manufacturers of plastic packaging and engineered materials, producing everything from rigid bottles, closures, drink cups, through thermoforming, injection molding, compression molding, as well as flexible films and nonwovens from, face masks to the materials used in diapers. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And so one of the key things, we believe strongly in the benefits of plastics. And obviously most plastics today are made from fossil fuels, but as Ismail highlighted earlier, we believe that the future for plastics is recycled and renewable. This chart highlights some of those key benefits. Mechanically recycled plastics. This comes from a study that the Association of Plastic Recyclers conducted in LCA, showing that they can reduce energy usage by as much as 88%. And then you have, Brascom's study, and we've seen similar numbers from others saying that bio-based plastics can actually net sequester CO2. If you think about bioplastics, as they grow, are absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere. And then if you convert that to a resin, that CO2 is then stored in the resin. So as long as you're using generating less CO2 emissions to produce the plastic than the original feedstock originally consumed in its creation, you're going to net sequester CO2 emissions. And as we think about net zero, I think that's extremely powerful. And I'm looking for more data to come out here. We need more data than just from one supplier. But this is something that I think is extremely powerful as we all look for net zero is, we have so many things that we're not going to be able to offset. How can we put more negatives on the board to, really achieve some more of those credible offsets? Because we don't want to necessarily just go out and buy offsets, right? We want to achieve those offsets. I really like the term insets, offsets that are actually in our value chain. And then, and a very important tool as well is, we prefer the name in the United States, advanced recycling. I recognize this is an international panel, so you might call it chemical recycling where you're at. But, we've seen that advanced recycling can reduce fossil energy usage by up to 97%. Some more data is coming out, depending on where you are globally. There is greenhouse gas data that's already showing favorably. I've already seen some preliminary results here for the United States showing that it will also be very favorable here in the United States on the greenhouse gas data. So we have many tools at our disposal showing that plastics are very favorable in terms of whether it's mechanical recycling, bio-based plastics, or advanced recycling. And so really we see that, recycled and renewable plastics are the future for sustainable packaging. Next slide, please. And so here's a few different examples that we wanted to highlight in terms of how we are helping customers. And so we recognize that, lightweighting has always been kind of the key for how plastics help our customers achieve their circularity goals. And, it's because lightweighting historically reduces costs. The example Ismail shared earlier about going from the bottle to the pouch, well, that's a classic lightweighting example. When you use less material, it reduces costs. And I believe in all of these examples, we lightweighted versus the previous product. And anytime you lightweight, you generally are going to reduce costs. That's a key benefit of plastics as we change from alternative substrates, as well as every time we iterate and come out with a new generation of package, we typically lightweight. That's a key benefit of plastics. But how else, as we look to scale sustainable packaging and make it commercially viable, how else are we going to reduce costs and really make that sustainable packaging, as I said, commercially viable? So lightweighting, of course. But I also wanted to highlight some of the other key ways that we just designed for recyclability. Looking at the Taco Bell cup in the middle, a key thing that's been done here is this also doesn't have any colorant. Colorant costs money. It also only has one color of print. Printing costs money, right? So if we eliminate colorant and just go to the most basic printing, I think that's some additional opportunities to reduce costs and help move in that direction of more sustainable packaging just by designing for recycling. And over here on the right with the buckets for the ice melt, this is actually an even better example of that because this eliminates the typical metal handle used on buckets. It's really important, and this is a key initiative for berries, to eliminate those metal wire handles on buckets and convert to an all plastic single substrate package to improve the recyclability of the entire package by going to that plastic handle. So we're designing for recyclability, but this is also substrate simplification. And so this is a cost reduction to go to, typically, I don't want to promise that for every single situation, but in general, this is a cost reduction to go from a metal handle to a plastic handle, but it's also designed for recyclability play. And, and if you notice, these buckets are furthermore gray. Well, most of the PCR, post-consumer resin, recycled content available to us for such buckets is gray. So instead of trying to mask that and make it be some other color, we've just gone with, the gray that typically is available for PCR. So once again, we're designing for recyclability, designing with recycled content, and we're going with the flow, so to speak. We're designing for circularity, designing with circularity. And I think these are all examples of how we can position sustainability for commercialization. So we're lightweighting, we're eliminating colorant, we're reducing ink, we're replacing metal parts. And then the other key thing here is these all have a degree of recycled content, but none of them are 100% recycled content. The M&Ms have 15%, the Taco Bell cup has 10%, and then the ice melt has 50%. So I want to, that's obviously a very high percentage, but none of these are at 100%. So I guess the other key thing I would say is, gradual implementation. Very few of our customers, although some of them do, and I'm very proud of those customers, but most of our customers don't go from 0 to 100%. They take more of a gradual implementation approach and say, how do I do this over time so that I'm not, ripping off the Band-Aid and taking on all that cost at once, as typically recycled content, not always, but typically is a premium to virgin. So, lightweighting, designing for recycling, and gradual implementation. And then, Ismail, as I was listening to you, one of the other things I want to highlight is not only as we scale is the cost of these, alternative materials going to come down, but you also touched on legislation and regulation. I think increasingly legislation and regulation are going to mandate these and make them, for that reason, the lower cost. We're seeing more recycled content mandates, we're seeing more extended producer responsibility, and I think that that's also going to affect the cost relationship of recycling and recycled content and make these, ultimately more cost advantage. So, I think everything's coming together to really drive circularity and really give it the boost we need to drive a circular economy for plastics. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert, for sharing some of those really practical solutions that you're working on with your clients on how to reduce costs for sustainability. And like you said, there are so many different components who are working in this ecosystem and so many different bodies, let's say, who are responsible for success of this ecosystem. But probably the most important would be the regulatory bodies. Once they drive the push towards making it really sustainable, and like banning there's already a ban on certain materials. I think that push is really required for wide scale adoption as well, along with the other parameters. So thank you again for sharing your insights. And now moving towards Tristan. Tristan, you are commercial director at Notpla, and Notpla has been in the news quite a bit for the successes that you're doing in terms of innovating on your substrates based on natural resources. Can you share a bit about that? What kind of innovations are you bringing in, and more importantly, how are you scaling it to drive down costs for yourself? And I know that you wanted to share a brilliant video which I have seen myself, but do you want me to play that in the beginning, or maybe once you've finished, let me know?
Let's hold it, Aditi, just to the end. So thank you. It's really great to be here to be able to talk about what we're doing as a company around trying to be a solution provider, or one of the solution providers, because it is, as we have heard from both Robert and Ismail, and also just the sorts of conversations and the events that I'm a part of more widely within the packaging industry, it is a multifaceted set of solutions that we need to address this issue around excess materials that are in supply chains, and ultimately a lot of that ends up in our environment. And really, this is the thing that we focus on as an organization, is this idea of making packaging disappear to the point where our packaging is actually edible. And so we are really trying to challenge lots of conventions that exist around packaging that have been built up over a really long period of time, and working particularly in the consumer space to help consumer-oriented brands think about their packaging differently, because part of that too is about the value that they drive for their customers, not just around making packaging recyclable or making packaging returnable, but also just challenging the entire experience that their customer might have around the packaging that their content comes delivered in. Next slide, please. And this really goes to the core of our focus as an organization. We are really focused on single-use packaging in the consumer space. And we all know that so much of this packaging that we often use as consumers on a day-to-day basis really is in our hands for a very short period of time. But if it's not dealt with in the right way at end of life, and there's an immense challenge in collecting all of this when it ends up in the hands of consumers and bringing it back centrally to do something with it, if it's not collected and dealt with in the right way, it can persist in the natural environment for a really, really long period of time. And so we look to nature for inspiration in all of our materials. So the classic example here, of course, is the banana, but really fruit and vegetables, they all come in their own form of packaging, the skin. We may choose to eat that skin if we want, if we think about an apple, or we may choose not to eat it, think about a banana here, but we can dispose of that banana peel and it will break down and return to nature in a really short period of time. So our name, Notpla, comes from these two words, not plastic, but also it's a play on the term not PLA, as Ismail, you referred to in your presentation. So importantly, what we're doing here is that we are not, we're not another bioplastic. We are operating in an entirely different sphere. And next slide, please. That sphere, by the way, is the sphere of seaweed. So we are using seaweed at the core of our materials. And the reason we use seaweed, by the way, is because it has lots of really interesting characteristics. It doesn't require any land to grow. It doesn't require fresh water. It doesn't require nutrients. But furthermore, actually seaweed, because it is one of the building blocks of life, it's one of those materials that's been on Earth for very, very long period of time, billions of years, nature instantly recognizes it and is able to deal with it, is able to break it down, and it photosynthesizes. And as we all remember from our high school chemistry and high school geography, when something photosynthesizes, it needs carbon dioxide and it needs sunlight, and it respires, in that process, it respires oxygen. So there's a lot of dissolved CO2 in our oceans, which is leading to challenges around acidification of our oceans. And what seaweed does is it takes that dissolved CO2 from the water, it requires that to grow, and it can lock up the CO2. So there's lots of really interesting work that is happening in seaweed, not just by companies like us in the packaging and similar spaces, but also in thinking about seaweed as a climate change mitigation device. So we're using seaweed across all of our products. And next slide, please. We are a small organization. We are a startup. You know, we've been around for about 8 years, and there's also an irony here in that we are based in East London, and literally just around the corner from our offices is where Alexander Parkes invented the first synthesized plastic back in the 1860s. So a lot of the things that we focus on are really around now these hidden plastics, and I'll talk a little bit about our coating, because this is the product that we are scaling the most at the moment. It's the one that we have industrialized, and it is a lot of consumers, and it's been mentioned a couple of times already, particularly around some of the challenges around adoption or greater demand for sustainable packaging, is often consumers are confused. They're not necessarily aware of the existence of inner liners of plastic on fiber-based packaging. And that leads to lots of challenges, of course, when it ends up in recycling streams and you've got this plastic liner that is stripped off the fiber. What happens to it? You know, it ends up in our natural environment. And so the coating is the thing that we have industrialized to the greatest level today. And therefore, next slide, please. Therefore, we think around of this idea of commercial viability in two ways. There's one, which is a really critical one for us as a business as we scale, is how do we continue to get more and more efficiency and greater manufacturing scale in our products to enable customers to take these up and to use them in a mainstream way in their organizations. And so we do that with our coating at the moment. We are single-mindedly focused on food service packaging. And so we're putting all of our efforts into industrialize our coating for this particular application, applying it to folding boxboard to address the PLA or the PE or the PFAS, which often gets used in molded fiber applications, to give the water and the grease resistance that is necessary for fiber-based packaging for food. We've spent many years around the process itself of mimicking the standard types of coating applications that exist in industry today that have been scaled over many, many decades, as opposed to trying to create entirely new processes. So it's really about integrating within existing industrial processes so we can get the scale, we can reduce the amount of CapEx that's necessarily required by organizations to adopt our materials. And we're able to therefore quickly, now that we've solved the technical challenges, we can quickly scale. Next slide, please. So we're now in a position with our coating. We have a number of other products that are in much earlier stages of development, but at least with our coating, we're in a position now where we are working with major global organizations to apply our coating to folding boxboard. Next slide, please. Which takes me then to the second point, and this doesn't come across so well on here because of the contrast, but I'll explain it to those who are watching this. This goes to the second point now around how we think of commercial viability. That is that there are a number of materials that are in the market at the moment which we would argue are artificially cheap. That there are a range of externalities that are associated with those materials that are not factored into the market price. And this is where things like regulation starts to come in to increase or to try and capture the effects of those externalities. And in the EU, and what this slide shows is that in the EU, there is now a common definition around single-use plastic And those two key definition elements are related to being a natural polymer and not chemically modified. So things like PLA, and PHA and PBAT, etc., are now being classified as plastics, at least in the EU. And so that means they start to get captured. Some of the externalities are starting to be factored into the market price around these things. So even though as we scale as a business, we're trying to bring our costs down, we also see that other materials are getting more expensive through the role of regulation as the externalities are factored into to those market prices. So back to the point around our name, not plastic, Notpla, but also not PLA, our materials fall outside of this definition of a single-use plastic according to the EU. Next slide, please. So actually, Aditi, this is where you could play the video.
Yeah, just give me a moment.
While you're bringing that,
I'll just stop sharing my screen for a second and bring the video on.
Just while you're bringing that up, just to set up the video. So we're very proud to win the Earthshot Prize at the end of last year. The Earthshot Prize is now in its second year. It was established by Prince William as a way of recognizing and rewarding organizations and individuals around the world who are focused on this mission of repairing the planet inside the next 10 years. And we were really proud to win for the category of building a waste-free world. This is just a little video of the announcement of that award.
Can you see it on the screen now?
I think it's just loading now.
David Beckham.
Yeah. All right, I can play it now.
And I can announce that the 2022 Earthshot for Build a Waste-Free World goes to Notpla.
All right, I hope you could hear and see the video. Am I still audible?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you hear the video, or was there any problem?
I think it's paused. I think, not sure if the video was completed, Aditi.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. Yeah, my screen got stuck a little bit. So was the video fine, or should I play it again? Just wanted to know.
I think we can just replay it. Because
Okay.
I don't know if it's completed. You know, I don't know if it's the end of the video.
Okay,
So
okay. Let me just play it again. Yeah, let me just play it again.
And I can announce that the 2022 Earthshot for Build a Waste-Free World goes to Notpla.
All right, I think that was the end of the video. And definitely congratulations to Notpla. We definitely resonate the feeling that David Beckham has. All right. Well, thanks for that great session, Tristan. Somehow my screen is, I don't know what's wrong. I'm not able to see any of you. Just give me a second. There you go. Okay, great. Thank you so much for those insights. And at this point, I can see there are a lot of questions. So let me start with that. All right. So the first question, there is no speaker name mentioned. So it's an open question to who wants to answer that. What is the meaning of mechanically recycled and advanced recycled plastic? The question is from Collins Patrick.
I guess I would take that one. So mechanically recycled plastic refers to plastic recycled using traditional processes that grind, melt, wash the plastic, whereas advanced recycling or chemical recycling would typically break down the plastic into its basic components and then entirely repolymerize it. So you get to a virgin quality plastic, but it's going to be more energy intensive as it's going to break it down and then rebuild the polymer chain. And there's many different types of so-called advanced or chemical recycling processes, but that's the most common.
Okay. Thanks for that, Robert. The next question is for Ismail from Drew Warnick. Can Ismail explain how to read the circles in his trend slides? Well, I don't know which particular slide is this, but what we can do is when we are sending across the slide deck over to you in an email, we will just mention against each of the slides how to read the charts. So then that's easier for you. The next question is for any speaker from James Foster. Do you think taxes or government regulations are the only way to push or at least jumpstart recycling and sustainability?
No, I don't think it's the only way, but I think that it is certainly a powerful way to jumpstart. I think that there's still lots of opportunity for industry to collaborate. In fact, arguably, industry often steps in and makes sense of government regulation. So, Ismail, you mentioned it on one of your last slides, and Robert, you referred to it as well, like the importance of people coming together to harmonize and to collaborate, because when in the absence of that, that's when we have organizations doing great things and consumers thinking it's a wonderful scenario that we have a recyclable toothpaste tube, for example. But unless all toothpaste tubes are recyclable, then a recycling facility can't differentiate between them, so they all end up going to incineration or to landfill.
Yeah, I think Tristan said it well, but I would just say, yes, the legislation creates a level playing field, and I think businesses rely upon a level playing field.
Okay, thanks for that. And then next we have Alex Ada, and he has a question for Tristan. Could you please explain how you are not another form of bioplastics? My understanding is you are using a biologically derived feedstock to produce packaging. So is it not categorized as PHA bioplastic?
So in the case of, thank you, the case of PHA, there's a fermentation process that goes on, which at least from an EU perspective, I can't speak for other jurisdictions, but at least from an EU perspective, that is now classified as a form of creating a synthetic material. So because we're not chemically modifying, we're not synthesizing, the polymerization process takes place in nature. Therefore, we're not a bioplastic like a PHA or a PLA.
And he has another question again for you. Is the coating on paper packaging recyclable?
Yes, it is.
Okay. The next question for Ismail from James Foster. I see industrial recycling lagged the most on your charts by industry, with them using the most volume and some of the most cost-sensitive buyers. What do you see needing to take place to move industrial packaging along in the recycling volumes?
All right. Yes, I think industrial packaging is going to play a key role when it comes to recycling. I would say not only recycling, but the reusability part can still be pushed. Because I think let's take an example of an IBC or a bulk container or a steel drum. I think a lot of industrial packaging companies are trying to adopt the pooling and the rental scenario for these products. So at the end of the day, reusing in the industrial packaging can play a very pivotal role in order for the industry to reach the sustainability so-called concept, at the end of the day, yeah.
All right, thanks for that, Ismail. Next we have again for Tristan from Carl Plumley. PFAS is becoming an increasingly hot topic in America and the world. Does Notpla claim to completely eradicate the use of PFAS?
So PFAS provide a sense of water or grease resistance to lots and lots of materials, and particularly in the food packaging area, which is where we operate. It's a material, or it's an additive that we see a lot of manufacturers and also brands themselves, restaurant brands themselves, coming to us asking if our coating can replace the PFAS that can be prevalent in their packaging at the moment. It's an area that is quite new for us. We're just starting to explore that now, because often it is in the bagasse or the pulp molded products as opposed to folding boxboard products. So it's about a different application process of our coating. So it's a slightly different technology that is required. The early results are really promising. So we hope that perhaps in the next year or so that we will be able to be a genuine alternative to that synthetic.
Great. And we just have 1 more minute to this session, so I'll take one other question. What is more important? This is for Robert. What is more important, recyclable or biodegradable?
Honestly, I would say recyclable. If you look at what WWF has published out there, if you want to achieve a circular economy, you have to keep the molecules in circulation. Whereas if you biodegrade, those molecules are lost from the economy. You know, there are applications where that can be of benefit. WWF has an amazing white paper on this. I encourage you to Google it. It really kind of spells out the use cases for biodegradable, and there are some where there is a benefit to biodegradation. But in general, I would encourage folks to, you know, recycling keeps those molecules in the economy. So for the most part, we should be targeting recycling, but there are use cases for biodegradation. So I don't want to write off that as a whole.
All right, perfect. I think we've addressed at least 70% of the audience questions that I see. There are definitely a few more which we cannot cover in the session, but we'll get back to you one-on-one. And most of them I see are for Ismail. All right, so well, we've come to the end of the session, and it's been extremely interesting to speak to all of you, to our speakers. And we had a great audience Q&A as well, just like I had expected. So I want to thank again, a big thank you to our speakers for joining, for taking out their time to be here, and of course for our audience for making it so interactive. So as discussed, all of you will receive a copy of the recording and the slides and the answers to some of your unanswered questions. So thank you for joining, and have a great rest of your day, great evening ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.